Hello, Buddhas. Today we are going to talk about how to start down that spiritual path that you want to go on. Now, Buddhas, before I get started, I've got a playlist down below with well over 150 Buddha Billionaire videos that you can binge watch for a spiritual awakening, at least to accelerate it. Now, if you are just getting started, I would recommend starting with this video, finish it to the end, and then go hit that playlist to go through my entire archive and really see what hits you, what resonates, and how you can use the mediums on the internet to really help you figure out how you're thinking. Not to teach you how to think, but to think about how you're thinking. But we're getting off topic a little bit. What we actually are going to talk about today is how to actually get started down the spiritual path. For me, there were two really big tenets or pillars that I like to refer to, and that was A, realizing that every damn thing in my entire universe is my fault, and B, questioning whether or not I believed in Abraham Hicks. And I'll explain those both now in a little bit more detail. Number one, A, was hitting a point where some things had happened in my life, and I've talked about them in videos in those playlists, but I eventually got to this conclusion where I was like, hey, the common factor in all this stuff that's going around in my world, in my life, in my everyday, the one thing that's always a factor is this guy, or I don't know. I'm not entirely sure where I am, but this body, at least, and the mind that seems to inhabit it, are a part of that equation all the time. So that's when I really started to hit down that self-discovery, that self-development, that think and grow rich journey, which, by the way, I recommend that as being the first kind of stepping stone into personal development. Think and Grow Rich, one of the greatest books ever written, in my humble opinion. And why this is so important is because it really put in perspective and put some focus and a spotlight on my own actions and how I felt about my own actions. And then that started to open just a floodgate of like, what are the possibilities? How can I better think about myself or better learn about thinking, etc. And this was a complete and utter game changer. The second aspect was listening to Abraham Hicks, listening to Esther Hicks speak. From a very logical engineering school background, always doing robotics and programming and maths as like my foundations in physics, I looked at Esther Hicks, which, by the way, if you've never seen an Abraham video, go watch one. Stop watching this, go watch that right away, and then come back because it's pretty incredible. I was watching that video and a thought just popped into my head, and I really had to sit for a minute, and I took some time to actually contemplate what my options were. And in most cases, there are two options in this world of duality that we live in. The two options that I had for Esther, which, by the way, if you don't know who Abraham is and you haven't gone to go watch it, Esther Hicks channels a group consciousness that refers to themselves as Abraham. So she talks, or they talk through her human form and answers people's questions for the most part. And I had to objectively look at that and come to a conclusion and make a decision in my life about how I felt about that. I thought the information was incredibly valuable and very positive and uplifting, and I liked what they were saying. But then I had to think to myself, is Esther Hicks really good and really smart and making a lot of money? Or is there actually a group of consciousnesses that have chosen to come through here? And the real conclusion that I came to was, what's wrong with both of those being correct? That is always the correct answer for any duality question that you're looking at. There's always a correctness in both aspects. But when I really looked at it at that point, because I hadn't quite gotten to this middle ground Buddha level of understanding yet, which, not Buddha, but working on the understanding of a Buddha, was, okay, so this Esther person here could just be the world's greatest scam artist, but doing it in like the most positive and uplifting way, so I don't really understand why, versus that this is actually a woman who has allowed this consciousness to inhabit her being and bring this beautiful message to people, and the amount of personal sacrifice and self-work and worth that she must feel would be absolutely astounding. And what a model to grow up to want to be like, and what an incredible experience to have consciousness coming through someone in a way that's different from what I would normally expect. So I came to the conclusion at that time that I was like, I really like option number 2 over here, that there is a group of consciousnesses. Let's decide that that is the case, and let's roll with it and see what happens. And Buddhas, let me tell you this. After doing that, I have now gone on a 1.5 year long or so spiritual journey that I would not trade for the universe, because this is the universe and it is the greatest thing that I have ever endeavored onto. So in recap here, because it is extremely straightforward. Number 1, you have to come to the realization or decide or have an epiphany of some sort, and usually happens with bad things, or you can decide it before something bad happens. Here's your opportunity, go. That you are the common denominator at the very least, and actually the entire creator of your reality. But if you can't believe the fact that you are the God of your reality, then at least agree or accept or work with the idea that you are the common denominator. And I think I'm going to make a video explaining that a little bit more. And B, the second aspect that really helped me, that you don't have to believe in to begin with to start on personal development, but it really accelerated my process, and it really opened my eyes to how the world works at a more fundamental truth level that I believe, was to accept and to embrace the idea that consciousness can come through in different forms. It doesn't have to be channeled messages through someone like Esther, but that was a really good example, a really concrete existence that I could make a decision on. So I made the decision that I was in charge of what was going on in my world. And then I also made the decision that what Esther and Abraham was saying was true. And when I combine those two decisions together, that leads to the journey and the real spark, the fuel and the fire that has now exploded into Buddha Billionaire, and the greatest part of my life to this point. So Buddhas, without making this one into too long of a video, remember, at the end of the day, no matter what you decide, if you can decide that you love yourself, then that's the most important thing. So, love yourself.